Hello, Mr. Fusion here, your favorite femme gremlin. And I'm here to talk about my Final Fantasy memories, this time of Final Fantasy X. And I know that it has been a while since we have done a Final Fantasy memories video when I covered Final Fantasy IX. That was in 2020. And still consider this one of my favorites, if not my favorite Final Fantasy games of all time. And it's certainly the one that I have some of the most interesting memories about. It's been a while, but for those of you who might not have seen the other ones, this is where I work without a script. We're not here to go crazy and treat this like a job. We're just here to relax and have fun and talk to each other, just you and me. And we're gonna have fun. And we're gonna be really classy while doing it. Because nothing says class like prop comedy. Anyway, Final Fantasy X. You know, it's been interesting. In the past couple of videos, I've actually gotten a surge in new subscribers. So of course, I'm going to throw all that away by being on camera because I always lose subscribers whenever I'm on camera. Oh, who am I kidding? Nobody watches Final Fantasy memories anyway. There are a few of you who do, and I appreciate that. And I see you. I see you and I appreciate you. So, Final Fantasy X on the PlayStation 2. Released in 2001. Oh my goodness. And yes, I am playing this on the PlayStation 2. I know it's been re-released since then on PlayStation 3, on PC, on Switch, whatever. I don't care. I already own the game. You really think that I'm going to just buy the same game again because the graphics are better? No, of course not. Think I'm made of money? Takes me apparently years to play these games anyway. And I know you're saying, but you know, the remakes, they're based on the international version. They got like the Dark Aeons and stuff. Are you kidding me? This game's already long enough as it is, filled with tons of stuff I don't want to do. You think I want to play more of it? But seriously, I really do enjoy this game.
All this because of me. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry.
But yes, I mean, this is Final Fantasy Memories. Of course I'm playing the original. Of course I'm playing the original because that's where my memories are. So yeah, you're gonna see my weird composite, poor quality PlayStation 2 footage that I've been recording all this time. That's just how it works. Those are how the memories are categorized. So, PlayStation 2. 2001. It was a magical time. It's a magical time for me, at any rate. I don't know. This has still been the only console generation where I've ever not gone Nintendo. PlayStation 2 is the only non-Nintendo console I own, and it feels like in 2001, they just had some killer apps. You know, everybody I went to school with was excited about Final Fantasy X and Grand Theft Auto 3, and I got both of them for Christmas that year. It was a wonderful time to be in 10th grade. That's all I can say, really. And I can't recall there ever being a time where Final Fantasy was quite that big. I mean, yes, 7 is the more well-remembered game, but I feel like we were still kind of riding that high. The movie had just come out, Spirits Within, and that is what kind of tanked the company. But, you know, just that sort of 1-2 punch of, you know, still relatively new PlayStation console with this game, it was a big deal. And I don't think, like, you know, I know a lot of people love Final Fantasy XIV, but it seems kind of confined to its niche. Like, this was like the last big mainstream gasp of Final Fantasy. But, you know, feel free to correct me. I could be wrong. I've been out of the game for a long, long time. I also think I should mention for this game, there's always been a lot of controversy around the main character's name. You know, in English it's spelled Tidus, and people debate, especially because the name is never said aloud in the game. People debate whether it's pronounced Titus or Titus. When it was finally spoken aloud in English in Kingdom Hearts, they said Titus. Then in its sequel, Kingdom Hearts 2, they said Titus. They're crazy people. I've always said Titus. I was subscribed to Game Informer at the time, and they had like a pre-release expose about it, where they were very clear that it's supposed to be pronounced Titus. So I came into it going, yeah, Titus, we got it, all right. But they also said that actually, even Titus was a little bit off. The name in Japan is actually Tida, because Tida and Yuna are Okinawan references to the sun and to night or the moon or whatever. So even though I've always called him Titus, for this playthrough, I renamed him to Tida for the first time. Just did it. I did it. That's where I am. So you're going to see it. You're probably going to see it in the footage. That was my choice, and I'm entitled to it. I'm calling him Tida. Darn you. But in terms of the Titus debate, Titus is completely off the table. Yeah, I'm never going to call him that. Blech. So yes, Final Fantasy X was exciting because it was a big generational console shift. One of the last times where a big console shift was actually important. I mean, this is when the Final Fantasy game shifted to having fully rendered backgrounds. It was all polygons, none of the pre-rendered, little just images they would drop characters, onto. And they look fantastic. I still think they look pretty good. Some of the textures are kind of low res, but most of the time you're not going to notice that, just because even though it is full 3D, you don't have any camera control. It's not a fixed angle like it would have been in the PlayStation games, because it was literally just a two-dimensional image you were standing on top of. But the camera is pre-programmed to follow you in specific ways, so you're never going to see what it doesn't want you to see. And so they frame it in ways that where it's going to be showed off in the most flattering way. This is the first time where there was voice acting in Final Fantasy, and of course, especially in the dub, that was received very well. But also, I think it's worth pointing out that the character models I've always found really interesting, because Final Fantasy has a long history of having multiple versions of their characters on screen. Like the first 5 Final Fantasies had like a low resolution little sprite on the world map and in towns, but in battle there was a much more detailed version. Then when you get to Final Fantasy VII, you have the little squat, mouthless polygon characters on the field with like much more realistically proportioned characters in battle, not to mention FMVs, the full motion videos added to the complexity, where you'd have all kinds, like sometimes you'd have these really realistic proportioned characters, and sometimes they just be full motion squat polygon, like it's so weird. Final Fantasy VIII had a realistically proportioned character throughout the game, and then like a almost photorealistic full motion video version, and 9 was kind of the same way, its art style notwithstanding. And so 10 stays with realistically proportioned characters, but there are still different models for gameplay and cutscenes, although sometimes the cutscenes use the lower model as well, and it looks really weird. I don't get it.
Right, whatever.
But yeah, like when they go into the really big cutscenes, suddenly their faces will be like really much more detailed than they ever were before. Like they'll have like the fully moving eyes and like the completely rendered mouths that can move with dialogue. But with Tita, there's always something about his face that seemed bizarrely familiar to me, and I don't think it was until I was preparing for this video that I finally put my finger on what it was. Uh, you're never gonna believe this. He reminds me, his facial features remind me of Robbie Sinclair, the son from Dinosaurs, that live action dinosaur sitcom in the early 90s. Like, it's not just like, you gotta see this, right? You really, like, clearly, they're the same person. It's amazing that, like, this seemed like such a huge leap forward in 2001, and it was. Like, compared to the Nintendo 64 or the original PlayStation, the PlayStation 2 was amazing. But you look at it now and you realize the main character looks like an animatronic dinosaur from the early 90s. That's just the life we live now. It's also worth pointing out the FMVs, because they return from the previous games. There's a lot more space on a DVD-ROM though, so no more of the multi-disc excitement from the previous 3 games, which I understand why, but there was just always something special. Like, it made the game seem bigger and more epic when it came on 4 discs. It's stupid, but whatever. But you can fit more FMVs on there, so there's plenty of storage space compared to the old CDs. I don't know if they actually use FMVs in this game as much as in the previous 3. Especially because a lot of the FMVs in the previous games were sort of used to like mark transitions. They would just be small sort of camera pans and stuff. And you can do camera pans now in Engine, because again, it's all 3D now. They aren't pre-rendered backgrounds for the most part. So I don't like anytime you had to do any kind of movement, it had to be FMV, because you couldn't do it in Engine, and now you can. So I'm not sure. There are still some, but I just feel like they're not nearly as much of an emphasis this time around. But the interesting thing is that back then in the PlayStation games, the FMVs felt like almost a totally different world. Even when they would let the on-screen character models, the in-game character models interact in the FMVs, it still felt like you were just going into a totally different game. Like, oh, here's my treat. But in Final Fantasy X, the gap has been bridged to a point where it doesn't really feel as necessary anymore. There are certainly differences. The FMVs definitely look better than the PlayStation 2, but it's like you're not going from this, 10 polygon character model with like this pixelated texture, facial texture, into like a completely photorealistic, almost photorealistic person, like with Squall in Final Fantasy VIII. The character models, they look similar enough so that you really notice, because the big difference between the in-game models and the FMVs is that all of a sudden the characters look really, really Asian, but only in the FMVs. They don't look that way in the character models. Again, they look like Robbie Sinclair from Dinosaurs. So it is almost more jarring in a way, since the FMVs and the in-game stuff look so similar, to all of a sudden jump in between shots to this character model who has a totally different face. So yeah, those were the growing pains we were going through in the early 21st century. So anyway, my memories. If you've been following Final Fantasy Memories, you'll know this story already, but since that was years and years and years ago at this point, I feel like I should reiterate. Final Fantasy X corresponds with my big Final Fantasy Christmas. Because I'd gotten into Final Fantasy through Final Fantasy VIII on the PC, I'd gotten 7 as well, and I think by this point I'd gotten Final Fantasy IV, the SNES cartridge I bought used from a friend. But I knew that if I was going to play most of the other Final Fantasy games, I would need to get a PlayStation 2. That's where I could really, just really bulk up on my archive here, because so many of the games were released on PlayStation or re-released. So you had the ports of. So for that Christmas, I got Final Fantasy and Chronicles, which had Final Fantasy IV, the hard version, and Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy Anthology that had Final Fantasies 5 and 6. I got 9, and I got 10. So that's 5 new Final Fantasy games, one of which I'd kind of played before, but yeah. And Chrono Trigger. So I was really excited to get a PlayStation 2 for Christmas of 2001. And I was so excited that whenever my mom was out of the house or asleep, I would go under the Christmas tree where I knew my PlayStation 2 was waiting for me, and I would peel back the paper and take a look at it. And then when I would get really, really bold, there was one night where I literally pulled the entire box out of the wrapping paper, opened the box, took everything out, and just sort of marveled at it. And I can't believe I got away with that. And then I would just very carefully put it all back in, close the box back up, slid it back in, and redid the tape. And maybe she never noticed. I don't know. But that has always been my favorite memory of that, is just how awful I was. But the problem with getting so many Final Fantasy games at one time, as you might have noticed if you've been following this series, is that I'm very, very slow playing them. I wasn't as slow then as I am now, but I decided I was going to be very responsible with my fun. So I was not going to jump ahead to the new hotness and play it while it was still new. No. I got Final Fantasies 5, 6, 9, and 10. I was gonna play them in the order of 5, 6, 9, and 10. I was gonna do that. That's what I was gonna do. By the time I'd played all the way through 5 and 6 and 9, I don't think I played Final Fantasy X until about 2003. By then it was old and lame. And that's not entirely true. I think I mentioned this on the 9 video as well, where it's like I got very familiar with the opening scenes of Final Fantasy 6, 9, and 10, because every so often I would just pop in the other disc and I would never make a save file because I was being responsible. But I would just play the opening scene in Narshe in Final Fantasy VI. I would play, the kidnapping of Princess Garnet in Final Fantasy IX. And here, I got very familiar with the opening Blitzball cinematic and Sin attacking Xanarkand and all that stuff. And I'd just be like, one day, darn it, I will get to play this game for real. It might be years away, but I'll play it. And so I got it at launch, or pretty close to launch, but it was years before I really, really played it. A couple of years. A couple of years seems like nothing now, but back then it was a long time to wait. In the days of Final Fantasy IX, Square made a really, really stupid decision that we talked about then, was that their strategy guide was basically just like an advertisement for their Play Online service. And so it would give you a general overview, but for almost any detail, it'd be like, learn how to fight this boss and go to Play Online and put in this code. And it was really it made it a very thin strategy guide comparatively. And it was really frustrating to spend, hey, let's throw out $15 and go, hey, go to the internet and look it up there. Especially given, the way that strategy guides have kind of gone by the wayside because of the internet. It just seemed kind of stupid for Square to just sort of hasten that departure by making it completely pointless to buy their guide. Thankfully, they learned their lesson, and so the Final Fantasy X strategy guide is a much nicer, much beefier book. It looks really nice, has the same sort of matte finish that the Final Fantasy VIII one had that drew me into that game. Because remember, that it was a strategy guide that I saw on the shelves that made me want to play that game in the first place. But yeah, it's like so much stuff. There's not a single thing in here that says go look it up online, you dweeb. And it just looks really nice. The only issue with this though, and it made me really sad, is that when I pulled it out of storage to start doing this playthrough for this video, I guess the glue is starting to get old, and so the pages are kind of falling apart. They're just hanging out loose here now, and it makes me really sad. None of my other strategy guides have fallen victim to this, just this one. And so pretty much every page I turned, I could hear it just rip out from the binding. And it was so sad. And I guess here in the Final Fantasy memories, we're having fun, but we have to be reminded that the ravages of time are affecting all of us. Even me. I'm getting older. Anyway, a few years later, as I mentioned on the Final Fantasy VIII video that's what allowed me to find CD Japan and start importing soundtrack CDs, and I listened to the Final Fantasy VIII one all the time. Since I was later coming into this game, I didn't play it until 2003. It wasn't until like 2004, I think. I think I just started college, where I went back and I purchased both the Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy X soundtracks. And look at that, isn't that beautiful? I still have this one, and has some really nice artwork and really nice cover, and even the discs look really nice compared to the Final Fantasy VIII one. Interestingly, though, I think most of the text in here, including the track listings, it's all in Japanese, which makes sense. I'm gonna say, wow, the CD I imported from Japan has Japanese text. Who knew? Although this is in English. The credits are in English. But I say that because the Final Fantasy VIII one, which I also imported, had all the track listings in English. So it was kind of a surprise to me that there was so much Japanese text just this time. So yeah, but I do have it. I have all the big old 4 CD set, and I still have it, and I still love it, because I got the swag, baby. So yeah, I played the game once, did all the stuff. We're gonna get back to that. And then I played it again, I think my senior year of college, so like around 2008. And I have not played the game again since then until now. Although now I've been playing this game since 2021, and I'm only now at the end. I've been playing this game for 3 years. Oh my gosh. I did not buckle down on this. I was not responsible like I was as a child to my video game playing habits. And for that, I can only feel ashamed. But yeah, it's been roughly 15 years or so since I played this game, and I did have a lot of fun reliving it.
The people, what? They're all dreams? Me, too?
The story of Final Fantasy X, I do think is really interesting. It's hard for me sort of now to disentangle it from the Spoony ones, Noah Antweiler's review series of it all those years ago, because he really took this game to task. But the idea of there being a giant, whale monster who is forever dominating this technologically repressed world, that there's a whole religion based around it, or summoners who go out and sacrifice their lives to bring a few years of calm, only for the cycle to start again, and then this outsider from a distant land shows up and becomes our hero. And also being a really unlikely hero. He's not this traveling warrior. He's not, this deeply troubled stoic cloud or squall type character. He's like this bleach blonde water polo player who's like this, has daddy issues, but beyond that is really just cheerful and doesn't play by the rules, but not in a renegade way, more in a like a puppy who pees on your rug kind of way, like, no, it's bad, stop it. And he's like, no, I'm the star player of the Xanark and Ames, and I'm gonna do whatever I want, screw your religion. He literally does that at various points in the game, where he's like, only the summoner can go in here. Well, I don't care. In fact, I think he literally says, I don't care at some point. I don't know, I'm gonna run in here and defame your traditions. But he does kind of, if you can get past, his complete and total disrespect for culture, he is kind of a breath of fresh air to this really repressed culture, and it's his influence that allows them to break the cycle. He brings a little bit of fun to the world, and don't we all need a little bit of fun? So actually, I do like him from that perspective. I don't hate him. I don't think he's that annoying. Yeah, I'm just gonna keep repeating that memeable clip, aren't I? I think he is a good character. Tita, that's his name. It's never said in the story, but that's his name. And his relationship with Yuna, the summoner who's resigned to her mission of throwing her life away, and it's a fun world to be in, and it is a fish out of water story, even though he likes to spend a lot of time in water. So a lot of exposition is, oh, this is the town of this, and this is where they do this, and this happens here. But you know, there is just it's a big critique on unorganized religion. You know, the enemy is literally called sin. You know, so it's, you know, the metaphor is kind of on the nose. I mean, the church is literally the church, so they don't try to be subtle with it. This is a story where the main character wears like futuristic lederhosen with like legs that are different lengths and has a sword made of water. Final Fantasy is nothing approaching subtle.
Was I the only one who didn't know? Tell me why! Why were you hiding it?
But still, it is also like a multi-generational conflict, which Final Fantasy's done before. Like Final Fantasy V has had the Warriors of Dawn, and who was the father of the main character, and this is exactly the same thing. Is that, you know, the main character's father, Jecht, was one of the guardians of Yuna's dad, who was the previous summoner. And you know, we're getting into spoilers here. It's a 23-year-old game. Let's move on. You know, the big reveal is that, you know, the final Aeon is one of the guardians who gives up his life to become the final Aeon to defeat Sin, and then the final Aeon becomes the next Sin, and that's why, you know, the cycle repeats itself. But that's, you know, it's similar to Final Fantasy V, where the main character's dad was that, and then the final surviving guardian of the last troop, you know, is Auron, kind of like Galuf in Final Fantasy V, joins your party, and is sort of that bridge between generations. So we've done all this stuff before, but it is done pretty interestingly here. You know, it's a beautiful world, a lot of beaches and water sports, but we'll get to that when we get to the gameplay. But it is endlessly funny that like one of the strongest weapons in this entire world is a Blitzball. You know, it's really funny to me because what got me into RPGs and in general, and Final Fantasy in particular, was the storytelling. Because like my first RPG was a Super Mario RPG, and I'd never played a Mario game where the characters had feelings, you know, because that was never a focus of that. And I was like, whoa. It blew my mind. It literally blew my mind to play a game at 10 years old where there was actually, you know, storytelling going on. And so that drew me into Final Fantasy as well, especially because that was all about just melodrama. You know, Final Fantasy VIII drew me in because I was heading into high school. And I was like, wow, is high school going to be like this? No, not really, but... But I do feel nowadays that I'm sort of less drawn, like now that I'm older and slightly more sophisticated and only talk about Dragon Ball for a living. You know, I don't know if I'm as drawn to it as I used to be. I still am. I still, because I'm nostalgic for these stories. They're my memories. They're my Final Fantasy memories, if you will. Try that again. They're my Final Fantasy memories, if you will. I'm so sophisticated. But frankly, I feel like I get more interested now in thinking about the gameplay. You know, because what I just described is that, you know, Final Fantasy X does borrow a lot of elements from previous Final Fantasy stories. But in terms of the gameplay, it's so fun for me to track the evolution of it because I do think that Final Fantasy X is kind of a transitional game. It's both like this huge step forward, but at the same time, there are a lot of evolutionary dead ends too. It really felt like this was the game where Square was getting self-conscious about what a JRPG was, and so there was a lot of pushback, a lot of clearly concerted effort to like move away from a lot of the traditions of the genre up to this point. So for example, every single Final Fantasy game up to this point had a world map, an overworld. Like you would leave a town, and then you'd be in this sort of scaled down version of the world, and then you get an airship and you get to just fly it around all over the place. And that, for the first time, does not happen in this game. You know, all of your paths in between towns are just part of that, again, pre-programmed camera angle 3D world. And so, and also that ties into the story because you're on a pilgrimage, a linear pilgrimage. So you can't really get off the path until the very end of the game where you do get control of an airship. So what do you do in a Final Fantasy game where you get an airship but there's no world map? Well, you just get a drop-down menu now, and you just choose your location on the map, and it just takes you there. You don't actually get to fly the airship anymore. You just tell the airship where to go. I'm gonna admit though that it is, a bit of a letdown in that instance. I get why. I get that they didn't want to do that anymore. And that it does kind of pull you out a little bit to be like, oh, now I'm in this other world. But I miss it. I miss it. But they definitely felt the same way when it came to like leveling systems. And this one feels a little bit flash in the pan to me, where it like unlike taking away the world map, which is a real tangible difference, this doesn't feel quite as big of a deal. But I feel like when this game was coming out, and maybe I'm just thinking about my friend group hype as opposed to how it was actually marketed, but I feel like I remember this game really being marketed as the Final Fantasy game that got rid of experience points and levels, which would be a really big deal, since the entire mechanics of the game or the series has always been based on experience points and levels. But really all they did was just kind of give it a new coat of paint when you really look at it. It's like, oh yeah, we don't have experience points and levels. Now we have ability points and sphere levels. Totally different. And it's like, no, it really isn't. It's pretty much the exact same thing. You just called it something different. Like, don't try to fool me. Like, it is somewhat different in the sense that they've gone back to having characters who have distinct archetypes for gameplay. Like, Auron is the knight. He's a heavy knight, whereas, is kind of slow but really powerful. You got Lulu as your black mage, Yuna who's your white mage and summoner, Riku who's your thief. They're all like the really rigid character classes like Final Fantasy IX had. And so what happens is when you win in battle, your characters will gain sphere levels. And a sphere level means nothing in and of itself. Like usually you'll gain a level when you get stat boosts. Doesn't happen now. You gain a sphere level and nothing happens. Because you take your sphere levels are basically just your dice rolls on the sphere grid, which is this really big, basically a board game. And all of your stat upgrades are on the board. And as you move around the sphere grid, you can activate nodes, and that's what gives you your upgrades. So it basically just adds a step, which I'm not complaining about, because it is fun to do. Mostly because when you would gain levels, unless you were actively paying attention to your stats, you wouldn't necessarily even know what advantages you got, what benefits, what boosts you'd even received. But here, like each individual stat, like you're the one doing it, you're the one activating it. So oh, I got strength +4. Ooh, I got HP +200. But because they are all it's individual stats per time, it does mean that you gain sphere levels a lot more quickly than you would gain traditional levels in previous Final Fantasy games, because you're having to, get all those things one at a time instead of in a group. But that also means that like they really sort of honed in on that kind of gameplay feedback, that gameplay feedback loop. The core gameplay loop. There we go. That's what I'm trying to say. Very quickly, very frequently, you're getting rewards every few minutes. Like, oh, a character. I feel like you're rarely going to be in a situation where you'll go more than a few minutes of wandering through enemy-infested areas where someone is not going to gain a sphere level. It happens very often, so you're always feeling as though you're accomplishing something. My only issue with the sphere grid system is actually, it's not that it's restricted, because eventually you can break off your own character's path and get on other characters' paths. There are spheres you collect that can allow you to jump to another character's portion. What annoys me is that everything is unlocked by spheres you collect. Like HP will be unlocked by power spheres, and new abilities will be unlocked by ability spheres. And there are locks that you can open with lock spheres. And it's one of those things where it kind of feels like the coins in Donkey Kong Country 2, where it feels like you're either never going to notice it because you'll have what you need, or you won't have what you need and it's going to be a huge pain in the ass. Because, it's a linear grid. Like, if you end up not being able to unlock a node, activate a node, like what? You're just going to move on? Like, who's going to go back and go, oh, well, maybe I'll go back and get that someday. No, you're going to forget about it. You're never going to think about it again, and it's going to go unused. So again, either you have the sphere and it's no issue at all, or you don't have the sphere and it's a complete waste. So I don't know why it couldn't just be, you get the sphere levels, you get to that point on the map, and you get the upgrade. Like, why do you even need the spheres? It's stupid. It's stupid. But overall, I do think it's a fun system, and clearly this is another one of those evolutionary branches that has continued on to other Final Fantasy games. Final Fantasy XII had the license board. Final Fantasy XIII has the Crystarium. I've never played Final Fantasy XIII, but it really does look like the next generation version of the sphere grid. So every game every game since Final Fantasy X, or at least most of them, have had some sort of obfuscating, version of leveling up where there's this visual indicator of what you're doing. That started here. So Final Fantasy X very much feels like the successor to Final Fantasy VIII because it basically is. From what I remember, Final Fantasy IX was originally like a side quest, a gaiden, and it was plugged into the numbered series, at the last minute kind of thing. So 10 really feels like it's the next 8, and it keeps a lot of the same kind of aesthetic and gameplay choices that does. So, the battle party is 3 like an 8. Even though 9 had taken it back to 4, there are no party rows anymore like there were in 9. 8 didn't have those. Same thing with like weapons and armor, where it's a much more simplified but customizable system. In traditional Final Fantasy games, you go to a store and you buy a sword, and that sword has a greater it adds numbers to your attack stat, and each subsequent sword you get adds even more numbers to it. But 8 had just one weapon for your characters to equip, and you could upgrade it over time, with customizable items, and that would make it stronger. And there was no armor at all. You would just junction magic to your stats. So 10 is a little more traditional, but still feels kind of like in that same vein of 7 and 8, where it's like, you can equip weapons, one weapon, one armor, doesn't get any more complicated than that. But instead of them being like sequential upgrades, now it's all about the customizable stuff. It's all about the abilities that come with it, because they aren't like, they have most of them don't have really any inherent stat boosts. Some of them will come with abilities. It'll be like strength plus 10% or strength plus 20% or magic attack plus plus whatever percent. But it's usually you just have open slots, and they'll come equipped with, oh, this is a ball that puts people, attack ball that puts people to sleep. This is a claw that has like SOS regen on it. Or this is a piece of armor that has elemental, that nullifies elemental attacks and stuff like that. And then late in the game, like a lot of them will have empty slots. And late in the game, you can customize your weapons and armor, and you can attach items to them like in Final Fantasy VIII, and that'll unlock new abilities for them. So you can customize what your loadout is. And so it's much more about, rather than having, oh, this is the new weapon, the old one, sell that crap. You'll hold on to this huge assortment of weapons and armor because you'll want your loadout to be different for whatever fight you get into. Oh, this is the guy, who's going to petrify my party. I better pull out the armor that has the stone, the petrification protection. This is somebody who is weak to poison. I better put on my poison sword. And that's not entirely new. There were certainly elemental weapons in previous games, but like now it's all about that kind of stuff. It has nothing to do with strength for the most part, except if you add strength to it. But the other big change, and this is the one where I say it's a dead end, is they bring in a whole new battle system this time. And it's a battle system because this is like the one sort of holdout for traditional RPGs, is like they completely revamped the turn-based battle system. It's now the CTB, and we had the ATB in the past, active time battle, for the past 6 games. And now it's the conditional turn-based battle system. And I'm really sad that this is a dead end, because this might actually be my favorite battle system in all of Final Fantasy, where it's like they get rid of the time element. You have all the time in the world to select attacks. Like no one's going to attack you, but because it's much more focused on strategy, where they make several key changes to how battles work. One is that now you don't pick your party in advance. The first 3 people in your lineup are the ones who start in battle, but you can swap out people for the first time in battle, mid-battle, and it doesn't even count as a turn to do so. Which really ties into how the battle system works in terms of characters being specific classes, where they really emphasize that certain enemies really need to be taken out by certain characters. And it's really simple at first. Like you'll have the big jelly molds who can only be taken out by magic, so you bring in Lulu for that. They're enemies that have really high evasion, and so nobody else can hit them but Waka and his really fast Blitzball. And there are some enemies that are armored, and so only Orin and Kimari, who have piercing abilities on their weapons, can hurt them effectively. At first, it really seems like, oh yeah, just swap in the right character and you'll win instantly. But it does become a much better strategic game for it, where you're constantly swapping out characters and doing their buffs or their debuffs, trying to maximize who gets ability points for each battle. And it is a lot of fun, and really also answers the ludonarrative dissonance of why are the characters not getting involved in the fight. Although it brings in its own ludonarrative dissonance, because if your active party dies, even if you have 4 more guys in the wings, it's still a game over. They're getting there though. Final Fantasy XII will allow you to swap in your inactive party if the active one dies. So we're getting there. It's baby steps. But it's all about strategy. Like it even the game even shows you the order of turns. It allows you to strategize based on that. So it's like if you know that the enemy is about to attack after your next guy goes, you might want to use that to heal your party a bit. But also it's that certain moves have different charge times. So like you might want to use your special overdrive limit break, but you won't get a turn again for a while after that. That's especially true for summons, who replace the entire battle party, and it's just one-on-one after that. And like you could, hope to maybe take out your enemy with using their 9,999 damage overdrive. But if you use it and it doesn't kill the enemy, well, you're going to be a sitting duck for like the next 5 turns, and you're probably not going to survive. So it's all about strategizing and using things like haste and slow on your enemies to prioritize who's going to go. And then there are like even some moves that are of such little recharge time, you might get 2 turns in a row. And so it's like, oh, I'll do this. I could attack, but if I buff, then I can buff and attack. And I've actually seen some moves. I feel like Shiva has a move where it's like, I would just get into a loop where I would just be doing attack over and over and over again, and the enemy would never get to go. So I really do like that strategic element to it. And I find it really sad that this is I think it's the only Final Fantasy game that uses this system, because it's so robust and it could have been, iterated on a lot more. But I think, like, in terms of we're trying to move away from the conventions of Final Fantasy games and of JRPGs, the whole, oh, I don't want to play this game because it's turn-based. Like, they really wanted to move away from that. And so, 11 and 12 and going on, it's like they really tried to find ways to de-emphasize, oh, you're just sitting around and waiting for your turn. So, conditional turn-based battle, throw that crap away. Nobody wants that anymore. But I do think that it is the most fun battle system in the game, in the series. And it also allows for a lot of different customizable battle scenarios as well. Like there are a lot of battles, boss battles, where there are like trigger commands that allow you to like take advantage of the surroundings. Like you'll fight on top of the airship, which has happened like in Final Fantasy VI before. But here it's like you get to give up a turn to give your pilot, Sid, orders. Well, I guess he's the captain. He's not technically the pilot, he's the captain, but whatever. You get what I mean. To like move in closer to the enemy so you can actually attack from short-range weapons, but then move the airship away when you know that the enemy is about to like do a really, really big attack and you want to get away from it. So there are all kinds of things like that the battle system brings into it that makes the combat feel more engaging. And I love it so much, and I wish more games had used it. But now it's time to get into the question of why it's taken me so long to beat this game. Because it's not as if I haven't played other video games while I've been here. While I've been playing Final Fantasy X, I have played so many Zelda games so many times in the past 3+ years. I probably played Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask like 15 times while I've been playing Final Fantasy X. I played Zelda 1 and 2 at least as many times as well. I've done Game & Watch Gallery. I've done like Beatles Rock Band. I've done like every game that I own before I've come back to Final Fantasy X sometimes. And I think that my tastes are starting to change. I feel like I've said this maybe on social media, maybe in other videos I've made, that I just, like, people look at a game and it's like, oh wow, this has like 90+ hours of gameplay. Isn't that amazing? And I'm like, no, that sounds horrible. I don't know. I don't want to play a game that takes me that long. That's like, it's very intimidating to me. And as the Final Fantasy games in general have always been kind of complicated and complex. And I know like that's the draw for a lot of people, but for me it's gotten to the point where it's become kind of intimidating, where it's like especially as an adult, where it's like if I just have a few minutes to kill, it's hard for me to sit down in front of a Final Fantasy game and go, okay, wait, I have this boss coming up and I got to customize my weapons and I don't know what am I doing here? And it gets so tiresome. Whereas like it's fun for me to sit down with like a Legend of Zelda game that I can beat in just like a few weeks. But it's not just like it's not even RPGs in general, because I played Super Mario RPG since I've been playing Final Fantasy X. I've been playing Super Lesbian Animal RPG like several times in the past year, which I highly recommend that game for independent creators. I love that game so much. But it's not as complicated. Like it still has the same turn-based mechanics and character stats and buying items, but it's not nearly as much of of a slog as some of the Final Fantasy games can be. Or like, when I was doing the Final Fantasy memories, I had to like, go to outside sources just to figure out how to take advantage of the job system or how to junction well enough to break the game, or but especially having to do a whole bunch of really tedious, terrible side quests in order to really unlock the potential and really get the best items and gear. And I don't know what it is, but Final Fantasy games have the worst side quests. I hate them so much, and I've talked about it before, but like starting with Final Fantasy VII, they just become so insufferable. I hate chocobo racing. But like you get into Final Fantasy X, that game just really takes the cake for just having some of the most painful things to do in a video game that's somehow disguised as fun. I could list those off for like, there's a whole quest about legendary weapons where you have to like do side quests to unlock them, and they are just the worst things in the world. Chasing butterflies in Macalania Woods, and quite possibly the worst one. Like, I think I probably screamed at my screen doing this as a teenager and in college. The chocobo. It's always chocobo stuff. Like, I don't even want a chocobo to be in the games anymore. I hate them so much after this. But yeah, it's like you have this mini game where you have to race a chocobo trainer, but like seagull, you have to like collect balloons, and like seagulls are flying into your face the entire time, and like the balloons take time off your timer, and you have to like get a perfect 000 timer to get the proper item. I that is my least favorite thing in the history of the world, is that. Suffice it to say, especially given that it's taken me so long to get through this game, when I finally was getting to the end game stuff, I'm like, no, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. I am not going to put myself through that torture ever again. But also, I mean, geez, Blitzball. I have never allowed myself to do that more than I absolutely had to. Never. Even when I was at my peak, I'm going to do as much in the game as I possibly can mindset, even then I would not touch Blitzball with a 10-foot pole. I hate that so much. And I know that's how you unlock more of Waka's overdrives. I don't care. But it makes the game easier. But no, I'm not. I'm sure, I know there are people who enjoy it, but I just don't even understand it from a demographic perspective. Like when I was replaying this game in college, I was having to like jockey for time on the communal PlayStation 2 with my roommates who wanted to play like Madden 08. Like, I don't care about sports. I hate sports. Why would you? I'm a nerd. I'm a nerd who's playing a freaking Final Fantasy game. Why do you think I'd want to play some fantasy underwater polo game? Like, what? What? Who thought that was a good idea? Why do I want to build my own fantasy water polo team and build up their stats? I'll never understand the appeal of Blitzball. Never. I have never I think on my second playthrough, I at least won the one required match you're forced to play. Didn't do it this time. Didn't bother to try it more than once. Like, this weird hybrid stat RPG sports game, no thanks. Why? Why would you do that? Why would you want to do that? It's terrible. So yeah, Final Fantasy X is just filled to the brim with the worst side quests and mini games I've ever seen in a game in my entire life. You could spend 40 hours just on that alone, and like, no, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. But I also feel like I need to do a lot of the stuff to be competitive. But no, I didn't do Omega Ruins. I didn't do the monster hunting. I didn't do the Blitzball. I didn't do the legendary weapons. Like, screw that crap. I'll never do it again for the rest of my life. I can't believe I was duped into it when I was a kid. It's terrible. But that's one of the reasons why I just feel so intimidated by Final Fantasy games now. Because like other games don't put so much emphasis on all of this tedious crap. It's like it's focused. you just have your quest. You maybe have a few story-based side quests that are kind of fun, but they take like 10 or 20 minutes. I don't understand this obsession with like trying to pad out the runtime as long as humanly possible. No, just give me a quick, fun, focused RPG that I can beat in a few weeks or maybe like a month, and that's it. That's all I need. But like, it's been hard for me to sort of recognize that I don't know if I'm going to be playing Final Fantasy games again after this, because they just take so long. They just such an investment, and I have other things I want to invest my time with. And that's a really downer note to end on, I suppose. But I really do enjoy a lot this game has to offer, from its challenge to its story to its main quest. It's just, even the side quests aside, it's just Final Fantasy games are just too big and too time consuming. Because like, I mean, just look at it. Look at the timeline of these videos. I played Final Fantasy IV in 2012 and I made a video about it. And then I think in 2013 I did Final Fantasies 1 and 2. And then in 2014 it was Final Fantasies 5 and 6. And wait, no, sorry, no, 3. What was I talking about? In 2014 it was Final Fantasy 3. 2015 was Final Fantasies 5 and 6. 2016 was Final Fantasy 7. 2017 was Final Fantasy 8. Didn't finish Final Fantasy 9 until 2020. And now it's been 4 years. And it's like, wow, it's been 12 years since I started this, and I'm still playing through my own collection of Final Fantasy games. I have 10, 2, and 12 left. I've never actually done 10, 2. I always sort of treated it as my substitute for 11 because I was not doing that online crap. So I don't even know, like, am I going to finally bite the bullet and do 10-2, or am I going to move on to Final Fantasy 12 next? I don't know. But I admit I'm not looking forward to it as much as I used to. So we'll see where it goes. For all I know, this series might end here. And like, nobody's gotten to this point in the video, so nobody really has to know. Wow, I am so down on myself when it comes to, because again, like they've never performed all that well. But those are my memories for Final Fantasy X, and that's it's given me a lot to think back on, and it's given me a lot to think forward on as I get close to the end of my 30s and have to prioritize what it is I have time for in my life. And if memories are anything, they're melancholic. They're bittersweet. I'll never be 15 years old again. I'll never be, pulling out a PlayStation 2 under the Christmas tree and sneaking a look at it. And I'll never feel the same way about Final Fantasy games that I did as a kid. But it happens. And that's why I have my memories. So, thanks for watching. Be sure to stay tuned for Dragon Ball Dissection December. Have a good day. Bye-bye. Mwah. Oh, wait. I'm so classy.